Hi and welcome to the Western Region Football League's Icon Series. Now what we're trying to do in this series is bring to you some of the stories, some of the people and some of the great characters involved in football in the Western Suburbs. And we have three men tonight in this episode who come to us as life members of the competition from very, very different backgrounds. Firstly, Rod O'Connor. Hello, Rod.
G'day, Kev. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Lovely to see you.
Great to be here.
Next to Rod is Ian Hamm, who comes from an administration background in the league competition. G'day, Ian.
G'day, Kevin.
Former president.
Former president, a long time ago now, 10 years.
And right up the end is Dale Sayner, who comes to us from the tribunal part of the competition. Hello, Dale.
I'm fine. How are you?
Judge Sayner, I think we should call you, shouldn't we?
Something like that. Not anymore. Retired now. Last year was my last year.
Rod, you started in the competition obviously as a player.
As captain coach of Parkside back in 1976. Yeah, and I had 4 years as captain coach of the side. Yeah, a great side.
1976 is a long time ago, and you were still at the Parkside Football Club. How has that happened?
I'm not quite sure, and I often wonder, but I've enjoyed it, and you stay there if you enjoy something, and I've enjoyed the 40 odd years I've been there. It's great, and I think it's now time that I should move aside and let some other blokes come in, younger guys, but I really enjoyed it.
There's got to be something special about a club that keeps you there for 40 years. Is there a tangible thing you can actually sort of say that is Parkside? I mean, we talk about once a Parksider, always a Parksider and those things.
About every 2 months, there's a group of about 15 to 20 of us go out for lunch. And they were back in the days of the 1976, 77 and those years. So they're mates that I've got to know and kept all those years, and it's great fun to get with those guys at lunch and have and we relive the old times.
You stand together and watch the footy together and have a punt and have a good Saturday afternoon when you do watch the boys play?
Yes, we do, yeah. There's a fair few of them come down to our games, and it's great fun. And I think it's just the comradeship that you get with those players and those guys, and you know, you die for them really.
Yeah. And your involvement, when did that start in the league? When you were asked to be the racial vilification officer?
Yeah, it was 1999, Kevin. So back in the 20th century, as my kids call it. Yep.
What was the need for that at that time? I mean, we now know how important it is, but back in that late part of the 90s?
It was came out of when the AFL first started to deal with it, and local football started to deal with it as well. It was really around making sure that the Western Region Footy League, because we do have such a diverse racial mix over here, ensuring that our league gave the best opportunity for all players to play in an environment that was friendly to them, that didn't allow, quite simply, racial abuse to happen in the name of football. It's really as simple as that. And setting our league up as perhaps it was the forerunner of this for any league outside the AFL, to be honest, because nobody else did it.
When you took that on, did you think it was a minor problem that was actually a much bigger problem?
I didn't know if it was a problem at all, but it must have been a problem because the league came to me.
Yep.
They were aware that there was issues that they need addressed, and it was very proactive of them to seek me out because I was living in Yarraville at the time. I still live in Yarraville. What it did demonstrate, while there wasn't an overt problem, there was certainly a covert problem. Yeah. There was many players who told me privately that they'd been racially abused, not so much on the field by other players, but over the fence. The attitudes towards people or some of the things. So while it wasn't a major, it wasn't a huge issue, there was enough of it there for the league to want to do something about it.
Now, how does that progress? How do you go from racial vilification officer to president of the league?
I was thinking about that yesterday, actually, in the car, Kevin. I went and saw all the clubs that year. I told the league, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it properly, so I want to go and see all the clubs and all the players, as many as we can. It wasn't until after I said that I realised it was under 9s all the way to Division 1 seniors. That's a lot of players and a lot of clubs to go to. But it was worthwhile because I actually got to know people, got to meet people. A couple of clubs after that approached Rex and said, this Ian seems okay, do you want to see if he wants to come onto the board? And 2 years after that, Rex indicated he was going to retire, and he spoke to me about becoming president. So I did.
Yep.
So it's a fairly rapid rise.
Yeah, absolutely. Dale, your come from a playing background, obviously, in football. How did you oscillate and get into the Western Suburbs? That started as a committee position?
No. Well, I coached a little bit back in the 80s, mostly juniors under 19s in the amateurs, and then I was actually working at Linfox. I was general manager of Linfox, and knowing Mark Panaluna for a lot of years, he asked if I could go on the board, and more on a consultancy basis on business affairs.
Yep.
Which I had time to do, so I did that, and I also looked after the umpires, would you believe, and the tribunal, just overseeing. And I made a few comments about the umpires that would have a lot
Rob's
of...
done the same thing, but...
I thought it was constructive criticism, then I made a few...
So did Rob.
And we're probably along the same lines too. But I didn't swear. I held my tongue, which was very unusual. And then I made some comments about the tribunal and the types of people that were on the tribunal. Nothing against the people themselves, but just the way decisions were being made. So Mark had a word. Mark Panaluna said, well, if you're saying that, why don't you do something about it? And I've gone, oh, no, I'll put my foot in my mouth here. All right, so I went on just as a panel member for 1 year, and Ian, 2003 it was, Ian came to me and said, no, you're chairman now. Didn't get asked, got told. Got told. And,
it's called delegation.
And we went, that's how we started, and we had 15 years of... we still took on a role of dealing with the umpires. As chairman, I spent many hours going and doing courses with the umpires and teaching the umpires about reports and tribunal and how it should work, and basically not to gloss things up and let's get to the bottom of it, let's clean the league up. And cut a long story short, we went from 400 reports a year to, when I retired last year, 60.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's an amazing
but
transformation,
we did it with systems and a smaller panel, and we took away all conflicts of interest.
Yep.
There's a lot of conflicts of interest, and we took them all out of the game. Yep. So everybody there had no association with any club.
Yep.
Apart from me, I had association with Port Colts, but I disqualified myself from all of their reports.
Okay.
Never ever sat on one until, well, after 10 years I did.
Yep.
When I had to rub out Jason Clark for 4 weeks. But he deserved it.
Yeah, okay. Clark, you'll be watching this too. Well, I want to talk to you about your experiences with the Parkside Footy Club, because the three of you, like members of the league, but for all different reasons that you come there. You, obviously, is going from a player to an administrator to a president, and the highs and lows of the Parkside Footy Club have kind of mirrored the highs and lows of the whole competition in many ways. What's been the absolute high for you from a Parkside point of view?
I think the absolute high was the absolute bottom too, and that was back in 2001 when the club was broke. We won the premiership. The president then had $10,000 in a bag, and he had to pay out $15,000, and even I can figure out 15 doesn't go into 10. So myself, Paul Barbuto, and a guy called Alan Nitsky took over the club with a few others. We were broke. We owed $35,000, and we went to the members and we raised that $35,000. So that was a low point, but it was an exhilarating point that we could raise that $35,000. So then the club kept going on, and that was in 2000, I think it was, and then 2003 we won the flag in A grade. So we got the club back on its right way.
Yep. Personal highlight? Well, you played a couple of premierships.
Yeah, I think the 81 premiership was great. I played to that one, and we looked at the background, the half-back line, and it was Stephen Powers on one flank, Ron Fraser, or Boost as we know, was a centre-half back, and I forget the other guy on the half-back flank. And in the last quarter, we just said, we'll set up a line across half-back line. And I was sitting there looking at Stephen Powers and Ron Fraser, and I thought, gee, I'm in good company here. Whatever I do, I'm safe.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, isn't it, when you, from 81 win the flag, and then 2000 trying to save the club, and 2003 win another flag.
Yeah.
You were president in those early 2000s.
I was, yeah.
Clubs got themselves in a lot of financial trouble, didn't they?
They did. Clubs were spending money to almost buy flags,
Yep.
and Parkside was a classic example. The administration before Rods had focused on winning a flag so much they did to the long-term detriment of the club.
Yeah.
There were other clubs that had financial difficulties. That also meant financial difficulties for the league as well, because people not being able to meet their payments to the league. So it put the league in the situation that we had to do some pretty harsh financial measures, financial disciplines for ourselves as the league, and we also had to enforce those onto the clubs to keep the league viable, to keep the league financial, but also in one sense to make the clubs some of the clubs manage their finances better too. Actually, Dale's was on the board with me when we brought in. I thought I was going to have the shortest lived presidency of all time because of the first budget I brought in, which was rejected by the clubs. So we undertook some measures to get that budget through, which was reduction in things the clubs were going to get, and we just said this is how it
you
has
would
to
have
be.
been really popular.
Oh yes, let's just say, the honeymoon was a very short one, Kevin, very short. But then when financial opportunity came along, clubs made the most of it. So the Hammerheads, for example, that was a particular boon to the Division 2 clubs, set them up financially that they even still now are enjoying.
Yeah.
So that was
Was that a high point for you from your tenure as president?
It was one of the high points.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a single one, but certainly first year as president, having to deal with that, that was certainly something which is right up there with those things which made you look back on, you think, wow, did I really do that?
Is there one thing you look back on and think that was a great achievement under my tenure?
I wouldn't say there was one thing, but I'd have to say over the whole journey. Rex was honest with me when he asked me to be president. He said, the league needs to go forward. It's stuck. We're still operating like we always have, and it can't. You need to take it forward. I look back on the whole of the whole time that I was president, and all those people who worked, who was part of the team that I worked with, so the different board members, the different chief executives, the different staff, and the people in clubs, and I look where it was when I joined the league in '99 as racial vilification officer, 2000 on the board, and when I retired in the end of 2007, and I look where the league was, and it was over that time it really did evolve.
Yep.
A much more professional administration. I think the relationships with the clubs were much better, because I put great value on relationships, so I spent a lot of time going to clubs.
Yep.
I turn up at people's half-time afternoon teas between the clubs, and I'd be there. I just found
There's
that
a
a really
Scotland King of the Western Suburbs there for a while, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I see. The little party pie is fantastic. And there are, some clubs did it better than others, but I'm going to keep that to myself. Okay? But that great value on relationships, updating our rules, a lot of them, we just made it a better feel for the whole competition. So I look back on all of that, Kevin, rather than any single thing within that.
Yeah, that's a very fair call, actually. Well, on the tribunal, what satisfaction do you take out of being involved in that whole process?
Probably the biggest satisfaction was it's hard to put forward, but it was cleaning up the game.
Yep.
And it was cleaning up the game. We put together, there's a few of us, it wasn't just me, there was a group of us who were there for a long time, and Ian and Mark were involved. The strategy was to get the clubs involved with the tribunal in setting up the game. And that means not the clubs getting close to the chairman, but the chairman having an association with the clubs so the clubs could talk and could find out which way their club was heading as far as what was happening on the field. So, in a line to that was the association we set up with the umpires. The umpires will probably listen to this, but back then they were nothing but a bunch of sooks and squealers. And that's exactly what they were, because everybody was against them. Everybody was hitting over there. Everybody was going to get a suspended sentence. I kicked it off back in 2003 and 4 and 5 and 6 by attending training sessions of the umpires and sitting down and say, well, what's wrong? And I went on my own. So I had like 150 umpires just firing bullets at me. And then I explained, well, what you just did to me is what you don't want done to you. Because you've just hammered me and you don't like being hammered, but you were happy to hammer me. So now let's talk about it. And from there, and we got down to how the umpires presented themselves at the tribunal, how they gave their evidence, how they didn't paint Rembrandts and gloss things up, and how let's just get to the bottom of every report. And they were told they've got to cop it if something goes against them.
Yep.
Because if the evidence doesn't weigh up, they don't win.
Yep.
And the same with the clubs. And with the clubs, we got down to things like we had fines for the clubs, and a lot of the a couple of the clubs out this way asked me to come down and talk to them because there was a lot of the people who volunteered. They are good volunteers, coaches and whatever, but when there was a fine because they'd done the wrong thing, the club knew that, they were just saying to the club, you pay it, I'm not paying it, if you don't like it, I'm going to leave. And one thing that came out of all that in the last few years was that we said, good, we'll fix this, so it's a rule in there now that any coach or an official that gets reported, I'm talking about runner, team manager, coach, they have to go and do theory sessions at umpire school. And they're disqualified.
That's a brutal punishment.
And they're disqualified until they've done it, which means they can't coach in any league anywhere in Australia under AFL until they've done it, which means the clubs didn't get the fines and it brought discipline into the clubs.
Yep.
And it was only a little thing, but they're the sort of things that we work with the club to get it done. And then we went, just quickly, we went into the advocate accreditation. And in the last 6 years, every club has to be accredited advocate. And we as three of us, as the two deputy chairs and myself, we spent 2 weeks every year just taking every club that wanted to do it, doing club accreditations and learning how the tribunal worked.
So no Philadelphia lawyers in there anymore.
Exactly, and we got rid of all the lawyers that were on the panel anyway,
good idea.
because they were useless.
Good idea. Are you buoyant, Rod, about the future of suburban footy? It's tough. I mean, you've, as you just said, you've been there in 2000, almost lost the club. There's been a couple of times when the doors have almost been closed.
Yes. I'm really scared about it. I am. I think, I don't know how we get the dollar out of the game. The best thing that the league's ever done is brought in a point system.
Yeah,
that's great, but there's still money being paid. You have a salary cap, but that may be exceeded. I don't know how you catch people by exceeding the salary cap, but I'm scared that leagues will, in the long run, will disappear. Clubs will disappear and then the league will disappear. Yeah.
Dan, you share that view?
I am a bit worried when I look at the landscape that we're in. We're in an enormously competitive environment for people's time. Football, as Rod said, clubs do put themselves in situations where they might send themselves out of business, and there is this thing with the dollar, and I agree, the point system, which we discussed when I was with the league and Football Victoria, we discussed about it then, that it's only come in the past couple of years, I think is great, if it only had been done 10 years ago, type of thing. I think the game itself, the way the game's played, and almost even at Division 1 and in Division 2 level, the high premium on athleticism, are we excluding people from the game? I think that's actually a real thing we need to think about, is are we the broad-based game we used to be, as opposed to now, particularly with our Division 1 clubs, are we excluding people from participating in the game and relegating them to spectators? In which case, do they want to be around? So I think there will always be Australian football, but it's not the only game in town, and I don't think it's helping itself a little bit too. I think that's the kind of thing we need to think about, is what do we want this game to look like, how do we keep it as the broad range attractive thing that people want to be at.
We've cleaned it up. We've brought women in. We've changed a lot of the things about footy. Is it still a game you like to watch? Is it still a game?
I love my footy. However, I think the AFL is isolating football. You have the AFL and then you have the rest. And they keep saying Auskick's a magnificent thing. My grandchildren do Auskick. But over and above Auskick and over and above the TAC, what does the AFL really do for leagues like the WRFL? You know, you hear people, I give a couple of 10 grand here, 20 grand. What do they really do? I can recall years ago, players, I coached a team, and I had Jason Dunstall, Dermot Brereton, and a few of the Hawthorn players came down 3 nights to that team and coach all the juniors. Best thing that could have happened. It brought members into the club. People turned up that night. Just them turning up for 1 hour was a huge pie night, huge money raiser. Yep. But they were allowed to do it. These days, they don't go to the clubs. The AFL doesn't do that, and the AFL doesn't put money into the clubs. They put it. We've got Auskick and we've got women's football, and which is growing. But even the women's football is only growing at the AFL level through the AFL. Yeah, the AFL comp.
But what does the Parkside Division 2 side do?
Exactly. And a theory is that out of their $200 or $300 million a year they get for rights, maybe instead of we have a Patrick Dangerfield who reckons everybody's hard done by in AFL as players, maybe 50 million of that should be distributed amongst the leagues. Straight cash, straight into the leagues, so the leagues can distribute it amongst the clubs that are struggling. That hypothetically, if $1 million happen to come to, or $500,000 come to WRFL, they may be able to give Parkside 100,000.
Make an enormous difference.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, it would.
But the AFL don't look at it that way. They look at it the upper echelon. All they're looking at is the cream on top of the cake. They don't understand where everything comes from, and I think they've got a lot of learning to do. It's pretty easy to run a company that's full of bucks, because anybody could do that. And all due respects, a bloke running a milk bar could run the AFL because the money's there.
Yeah, great. What did life membership of this competition mean to you, Rod?
It was a bit of a surprise, really. And I thought it was...
Because you'd fought with them so much.
Yeah, I fought with the league a fair bit. But it really just sort of, when I think back, I think maybe it's a recognition that I've been with the league, I've been with the Parkside for so long, and I haven't worn the badge, but I've got it up at home on the trophy cabinet, looking at it always. So it just meant recognition that I'd done something, and I'm happy with it. Yeah.
For you?
I was just extremely humbled to get it, Kevin. I mean, I never thought I'd get life membership of anything, let alone something like the league, particularly when, as president, you do meet other life members and you know their records. It certainly was for me. Actually, I'll tell you, you asked me what I got out of the league. If you asked me that, what I got out of this league was something that I very rarely get, and that's not being looked at as just an Aboriginal person. And it was really funny that it happened in football, because most people think blackfellas in football, we can all play the game and stuff. I was president of the league and I'm Aboriginal. The first one and so far the only one in Australia. And not once during my tenure as president or on the board did my Aboriginality get raised by anyone in any context. I got heaps from club presidents. Rod given it to me, but that was in relation to my performance as president, the governance of the league and so forth, which to me was really important. So that life membership badge was, if you like, a recognition for me, just for me, and not for any other context of who I am and what I'm about. Most of my work has been in Aboriginal affairs. I mean, I'm Aboriginal, so it's that. But the league it allowed me to be me for a change, not me in an Aboriginal context, and that's probably the thing I value the most.
A different Ian Hamm almost.
Or a different Ian Hamm, and that life membership meant that I was this group of people who'd let me be president of the league had appreciated what I'd done.
Wow, that's quite touching actually. For you, Dale, because
I was just totally blown away. I didn't expect it. Totally honoured. It's a huge honour to be a life member of anything. But I was totally honoured, and I just didn't expect it. I was speechless. It's a big honour and it's a huge one, and that's why I'll always have a little bit of me in the league. Yeah. Because you're not always there, because I like to do other things. I've done other things with other sports, but it's a huge honour. Yeah. But can I say, probably wouldn't have lasted longer if it wasn't for Ian and Mark Penaluna. Yeah. Especially Ian. And Ian, just quickly, Ian was talking about Aboriginal affairs and Indigenous. I handled racial vilification with ease. And I handled it with ease because of a couple of conversations I had with Ian about not thinking about it.
Yep.
Not thinking about the person, not thinking about where they came from, thinking about what took place.
Yep.
And he was a great teacher, and I will say this, the league today, in the last year of Ian and Mark formed the foundation of where the league is today.
Set an enormous
They
benchmark,
set
didn't
the
they? Yeah, they did.
foundation, and I have a lot of conversations when we get together. We always have a chat, Ian and I, and it's because of those two. They put all the ducks in a row,
Yep.
all the square pegs in the square holes,
Yeah.
and they set it up for the future, and it's worked. But yeah, I'm humbled. I still to this day don't know why. Because sometimes you're shocked, well, what do I really do? And I suppose you put in a lot of years in that.
That's generally what people who get life membership say, what did I do? Because they don't actually understand the contribution they made. The three of you have made enormous contributions to clubs, to the league, and to making the competition a better competition. We thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.